We wake up into the same world every morning, but not as the same person. Something has shifted overnight. Not always in the body, not always in the environment, but in the unseen place where thought becomes action. And if we are not careful, we rise already defeated, already pulled back into the same patterns that have kept us stagnant, the same doubts, the same reactions, the same quiet surrender to things we claim to hate. This is how most people live, not through dramatic failure, but through repetition. The repetition of weakness, the repetition of distraction, the repetition of giving control away, one small decision at a time. And over time, this repetition hardens into identity. A person does not become stuck overnight. They become stuck because they wake up each day and unknowingly choose to remain exactly where they are. But there is another way to live, a way that begins the moment we open our eyes, a way that demands something from us before the world makes its demands. It requires that we take command of the only thing that has ever truly belonged to us, our inner world, our thoughts, our judgments, our will. We are not here to drift. We are not here to react endlessly to whatever the day throws at us. We are here to stand firm, to act with intention, and to reshape the direction of our lives from the inside out. But this does not happen randomly. It begins with what we tell ourselves every single morning. These are not empty affirmations. These are principles. They are reminders forged in truth. And if we repeat them with clarity, with discipline, and with full awareness, they will change us. If we ignore them, we will remain exactly as we are. 1. I control my mind. Nothing else controls me. The day begins with a quiet test. Before the noise, before the responsibilities, before the pressure of expectation, there is a moment where we decide who is in charge. Most people fail here. They reach for distraction. They allow their thoughts to run unchecked. They wake up already reacting, already surrendering to impulses they haven't even examined. But we do something different. We pause. We recognize that the mind, if left untrained, will betray us. It will amplify fear. It will exaggerate problems. It will cling to comfort and avoid growth. And so we remind ourselves deliberately that this voice inside us is not our master. It is our tool. As Epictetus once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This is not just a quote to admire. It is a command, a responsibility. If we fail to take control of our thoughts, we will be controlled by them. And if we are controlled by them, we are not free. We feel it immediately when we take ownership. There is a shift, a steadiness. The chaos that usually defines the morning loses its grip. We are no longer dragged into the day. We step into it. There is intention behind every thought, every movement. This is where discipline begins. Not in the gym, not in the work, but in the mind. Because everything that follows is shaped by what we allow to take root here. If we win this first battle, the rest of the day becomes something we can face, not something we fear. And if we lose it, then nothing else matters. Because a mind that is not under control will sabotage every opportunity placed in front of it. 2. Nothing that happens today is against me. The world does not bend to our preferences. It does not adjust itself to our comfort. It moves forward indifferent to our plans, our expectations, and our desires. And yet most people spend their entire lives resisting this reality, fighting against what is instead of working with it. We choose a different path. We accept, fully and without resentment, that whatever happens today is part of the process. Not an obstacle to our growth, but a condition of it. Every delay, every inconvenience, every unexpected challenge is something we can use. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is not optimism. It is clarity. It is the understanding that resistance wastes energy, while acceptance sharpens it. When we repeat this in the morning, we prepare ourselves for reality. We are no longer shocked by difficulty. We are not thrown off balance when things go wrong. Instead, we remain steady, focused, unmoved. There is a quiet power in this mindset. It removes the emotional chaos that usually follows setbacks. It replaces frustration with purpose. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we ask, "How can I use this?" And that question changes everything because it shifts us from being victims of circumstance to participants in our own growth. The day will test us. That is guaranteed. But whether those tests weaken us or strengthen us depends entirely on how we meet them. 3. I will not be ruled by emotion. I will guide it. Emotion is not the enemy, but unchecked emotion is. It clouds judgment. It distorts reality. It pulls us toward decisions that feel right in the moment but damage us in the long run. And yet most people treat emotion as truth. They act on it without question, without hesitation. We refuse to do that. We recognize emotion for what it is, a signal, not a command. It tells us something is happening, but it does not decide what we do next. That responsibility belongs to us. As Seneca warned, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. This is the trap. The mind takes a simple emotion and builds an entire narrative around it. Fear becomes catastrophe, anger becomes justification, doubt becomes certainty, so we interrupt it. We create space between feeling and action. We observe what we feel without immediately obeying it. And in that space, we reclaim control. This is not easy. It requires awareness, it requires patience, but it also creates a kind of strength that cannot be shaken. Because when we are no longer controlled by emotion, we become consistent, reliable, grounded. We begin to respond instead of react. We make decisions based on principle, not impulse. And over time, this builds a life that is stable, not chaotic. Emotion will always be there, but it does not have to lead. That role belongs to us. 4. I will act with purpose, not hesitation. There is a quiet danger in overthinking. It disguises itself as caution, as intelligence, as preparation. But more often than not, it is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping into something uncertain. And so people wait, they delay, they tell themselves they need more time, more clarity, more confidence. But the truth is, action creates clarity, not the other way around. We remind ourselves of this every morning. We do not wait for perfect conditions. We do not wait to feel ready. We act because action is the only path forward. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This is not meant to create fear. It is meant to create urgency, a sense that time is not something we can waste. When we internalize this, hesitation loses its power. We stop treating decisions as something to avoid. We begin to see them as opportunities to move forward, even if imperfectly. There is a freedom in this. Because once we accept that action is required, the burden of perfection disappears. We are no longer trying to get everything right. We are simply moving, learning, adjusting, and that momentum builds, it compounds, it turns small actions into significant change. The difference between a stagnant life and a progressing one is not talent, it is not luck, it is the willingness to act even when it is uncomfortable. 5. I will endure what I must and become stronger because of it. There will be moments today that test our limits, moments that demand patience when we feel none, strength when we feel weak, discipline when we want to give in, and in those moments we have a choice. Most people resist discomfort. They avoid it, escape it, or complain about it. But we understand something different. Discomfort is not the enemy. It is the training ground. It is where resilience is built. As Epictetus taught, difficulties show what men are, not in theory, not in intention, but in reality. It is easy to claim strength when nothing is required of us. It is much harder to demonstrate it when it matters. So we prepare ourselves. We accept that discomfort is part of the path. We do not run from it. We move through it. With awareness, with control, with the understanding that every challenge is shaping us. This creates a kind of confidence that cannot be faked, because it is built on experience, on proof, on the knowledge that we have faced difficulty before and come out stronger. Over time, this changes how we see the world. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. And that is how growth happens. Not through comfort, but through the willingness to endure. 6. I will leave this day better than I found it. At the end of everything, this is what remains. Not how easy the day was, not how comfortable we felt, but what we did with it. Whether we improved, whether we acted with integrity, whether we moved even slightly closer to the person we are trying to become. We begin the day with this in mind, because without direction, effort is meaningless. We can stay busy all day and still go nowhere. But when we define what better means, every action becomes intentional. This is not about perfection. It is about progress, small, consistent improvement that compounds over time. A decision here, a disciplined action there, and slowly, almost invisibly, we change. As Seneca reminded, while we are postponing, life speeds by. There is no later, there is only now. And what we do with this moment determines everything that follows. So we take responsibility, fully. Without excuse, we do not blame circumstances. We do not wait for motivation. We act because it is within our control. And when the day ends, we reflect, not with judgment, but with honesty. Did we live according to these principles? Did we hold the line when it mattered? Because tomorrow will come, and when it does, we will begin again, not as the same person, but as someone who has moved forward, even if only by a step. There is a story often told about Epictetus, who was born into slavery and lived much of his early life under the control of a master who had power over his body, but not his mind. One day, his master twisted his leg with such force that it was clear it would break. Epictetus calmly said, "If you continue, you will break it." The master ignored him, and the leg snapped. And in that moment, Epictetus simply responded, "Did I not tell you?" There was no anger, no emotional collapse, no loss of control. Because even in pain, he understood something most people never grasp. What happens to us is not nearly as important as how we respond to it. That level of control is not natural, it is trained. And it begins with what we repeat to ourselves before the world tests us. We see the same principle reflected in the life of Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire while constantly battling war, disease, betrayal, and exhaustion. His mornings were not peaceful escapes. They were filled with the weight of responsibility most people could never imagine. And yet, he wrote to himself daily, not to impress others, but to stay grounded. He reminded himself that he would meet difficult people, that he would face frustration, that nothing would go exactly as planned. But instead of resenting this reality, he accepted it in advance. And because of that, he was never surprised by hardship. He was prepared for it. That preparation is what allowed him to remain steady while everything around him was unstable. There is a moment in life where we realize that waiting for things to feel right is what has been holding us back all along. Think about the times we hesitated, when we knew what needed to be done but delayed anyway. The opportunity didn't disappear immediately, it lingered, but something inside us weakened each time we chose comfort over action, and over time, hesitation becomes identity. We start to believe we are the kind of person who waits, the kind who overthinks, the kind who never fully commits. That belief is more dangerous than failure itself, because failure can be corrected, but identity, if left unchecked, becomes permanent. Consider how often emotion has led people into regret. A single moment of anger destroying years of trust. A wave of fear preventing a life-changing decision. A surge of doubt stopping someone from pursuing something they deeply wanted. These are not rare events. They are daily occurrences, and what makes them dangerous is how justified they feel in the moment. Emotion convinces us that it is right, that it must be obeyed. But when we step back later, when the intensity fades, we see clearly that we were not thinking, we were reacting. And reaction, when unexamined, leads to outcomes we would never consciously choose. There is power in creating distance between what we feel and what we do. Imagine a situation where frustration rises. Someone disrespects us, something doesn't go our way, or a plan falls apart. The immediate reaction is to respond with equal intensity, to match emotion with emotion. But what happens when we pause instead? When we observe the feeling without acting on it? That moment of restraint changes everything. It allows reason to return. It allows us to choose a response that aligns with who we want to be, not just what we feel in the moment. That is not weakness. That is control. We can look at the discipline of daily labor as another example. There are countless people who begin something, working out, building a skill, creating something meaningful, but abandon it the moment it becomes uncomfortable. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack endurance. They expect progress without resistance. But growth does not work that way. It demands repetition. It demands effort, especially on the days when motivation is absent. And those are the days that matter most. Because discipline is not proven when things are easy, it is proven when they are not. There is also a deeper lesson in how we view obstacles. Most people see them as interruptions, something that delays progress. But what if the obstacle is the progress? Think about every skill we admire. Strength, patience, focus, resilience. None of these are developed in ideal conditions. They are forged through difficulty, through resistance, through moments where giving up would have been easier. If we remove the obstacle, we remove the opportunity to grow. And once we understand this, we stop asking for an easier path. We begin to value the challenges that shape us. Time itself offers one of the harshest lessons. There are people who have spent years telling themselves they will start soon. Soon they will take control of their life. Soon they will become disciplined. Soon they will change. But soon never arrives, because the habit of postponing becomes a cycle, and while they wait, life moves forward without them. Opportunities pass, potential fades, and what remains is the realization that time was never the problem. Decision was. The moment we act, everything begins to shift. But until then, nothing changes. We can also observe how environment influences behavior. When surrounded by negativity, distraction, or complacency, it becomes easy to adopt those same patterns. Not because we choose them consciously, but because repetition shapes us. That is why the morning matters so much. It is the one moment we can create a controlled environment before the world interferes. A moment where we decide what thoughts we allow in, what mindset we carry forward, and that decision influences everything that follows. There is something powerful about ending the day with reflection. Not judgment, not self-criticism, but honest evaluation. What did we do well? Where did we lose control? Where can we improve? This practice creates awareness, and awareness leads to change. Without it, we repeat the same mistakes endlessly, unaware of the patterns that keep us stuck. But with it, we begin to see clearly. We begin to adjust. And over time, those small adjustments create significant transformation. Even in moments of failure, there is an opportunity. Failure does not define us unless we allow it to. It is information, feedback, a signal that something needs to change. But most people attach emotion to it. They see it as a reflection of their worth rather than a part of the process. And that interpretation is what holds them back, because once failure becomes personal, it becomes something to avoid. But when we detach from it, when we see it objectively, it becomes something we can use. There is also strength in consistency that often goes unnoticed. Small actions repeated daily may not seem significant in the moment, but over time they compound. A single disciplined choice may feel insignificant, but repeated over weeks, months, years, it becomes transformation. This is how real change happens. Not through sudden breakthroughs, but through steady, deliberate action. And when we step back and look at all of this, a pattern becomes clear. The difference between those who remain stuck and those who move forward is not intelligence, talent, or luck. It is control. Control over thought, control over emotion, control over action. And that control is not given. It is built. Every morning, every decision, every moment we choose discipline over comfort, awareness over reaction, action over hesitation. So when we wake up tomorrow, the question is not what the day will bring, That is out of our hands. The question is who we will be when it arrives, because that is where everything begins, and that is what determines everything that follows. There is a lesser-known story about Cato the Younger, a man who chose discomfort on purpose, not because he had to, but because he refused to become dependent on comfort. He would wear simple clothing in public, even when it made him stand out. He would walk barefoot at times, not to impress anyone, but to remind himself that he could endure hardship without losing composure. This wasn't about appearance, it was about preparation. He understood that if he trained himself in small, voluntary discomforts, then real hardship would never break him. That is the kind of strength built before the day even begins. We can apply that directly to how we wake up. Most people reach for comfort immediately: the phone, the distraction, the easy escape from stillness. But what if instead we chose a small challenge first? Getting up without delay, sitting in silence, facing our thoughts without running from them. These are simple actions, but they train something deeper. They build the ability to face discomfort without collapsing, and once that ability is developed, it carries into every part of life. There is also the example of Marcus Aurelius again. Not as a ruler this time, but as a human being surrounded by constant irritation. In his writings, he repeatedly reminds himself that people will be rude, selfish, dishonest, and ignorant. Not occasionally, but regularly. And instead of wishing this would change, he prepares for it. He expects it. Because when we expect difficulty, we are not shaken by it. We meet it with stability, not surprise. Think about how different a day feels when we are caught off guard by negativity versus when we anticipate it. If someone disrespects us and we didn't expect it, it feels personal. It feels like an attack. But if we already accepted that people act according to their own limitations, their own ignorance, their own struggles, then their behavior loses its power over us. We remain grounded, not because the situation changed, but because our perspective did. There is a powerful lesson in restraint that comes from observing how quickly things can spiral when left unchecked. A single careless word can turn into conflict. A moment of impatience can damage relationships. A reaction driven by pride can create consequences that last far longer than the emotion that caused it. And yet, all of these outcomes could have been avoided with a pause, a single moment of control. Imagine standing in that moment, the emotion rising, the urge to react building, and choosing silence instead. Not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough not to be controlled. That silence is not passive. It is intentional. It is a demonstration that we are not slaves to impulse. And over time, those moments of restraint build a reputation, not just in the eyes of others, but within ourselves. There are also countless examples of people who transform their lives not through sudden inspiration, but through relentless consistency. Think of someone who commits to improving their health. The first day feels insignificant. The second day feels repetitive. The third day feels unnecessary, but they continue. And weeks later, something shifts. The effort that once felt forced becomes natural. The discipline that once felt difficult becomes identity. And it all started with a decision made early, before the day had a chance to interfere. The same applies to mental discipline. Repeating these principles every morning may feel small. It may feel like nothing is changing. But over time, those words begin to shape thought. Thought begins to shape action. And action begins to shape life. This is how transformation happens, not in dramatic moments, but in quiet repetition. There is also a lesson in how we interpret failure. Consider someone who attempts something new and fails quickly. Their immediate reaction might be embarrassment, frustration, or self-doubt. They might think, "I'm not good at this," or "this isn't for me," and so they stop. But what if they viewed that same failure differently? As information, as feedback, as part of the process. The outcome does not change, but the meaning does. And that meaning determines whether they continue or quit. We can also look at how people respond to uncertainty. Some freeze. They wait for clarity before acting. But clarity rarely comes before action. It comes from it. Those who move forward, even when unsure, begin to learn. They adjust, they improve, and over time, what once felt uncertain becomes familiar. But that only happens if they are willing to step into the unknown without guarantees. There is a quiet strength in accepting that we do not control outcomes. We can prepare, we can act, we can give our best effort, but the result is never fully in our hands. And this realization can either create anxiety or freedom. Anxiety if we try to control what we cannot. Freedom if we focus only on what we can. When we let go of the outcome, we become fully present in the process. And that is where our power lies. Think about how much energy is wasted worrying about things that have not happened, conversations that might go wrong, outcomes that might fail, problems that might arise, and in most cases, these imagined scenarios never even occur. But the stress they create is real. It affects focus, it drains energy, it limits action. When we recognize this, we begin to question those thoughts. We stop treating them as truth, and in doing so, we reclaim our attention. There is also a deeper understanding that comes with time, that life does not owe us ease. It does not promise comfort, fairness, or simplicity. And once we accept that, we stop resisting reality. We stop expecting things to be different, and instead, we focus on how we respond. This shift removes a significant amount of frustration, because we are no longer fighting what is. We are working with it. And in the end, all of these lessons point back to the same truth. The morning is where it begins, not because it is magical, but because it is the one moment we can shape before everything else tries to shape us. The thoughts we choose, the principles we repeat, the mindset we adopt, these are not small things. They are the foundation. So when we rise, we are not just starting another day, we are making a decision to remain as we are, or to move forward, to react, or to lead, to stay stuck, or to change. And that decision, made consistently, is what separates a life of repetition from a life of growth.